To order. All members, is John here? John Newman's not here yet. Did he call anybody? Okay. The first item is to review the budget. We have fire pension, OPEB, fire special millage, environmental fund, hydro station, and motor pool repair. Giovanna.
Hi, Giovanna Neal, Accounting Director. So we'll start off with our fire fund, go over the budget there. We have, in the fire department, I know a lot of times that people ask how many people are in the fire department, and so I just kind of put it down there so you could kind of see each of the positions in one place. So we've got the Chief Copeland, Fire Marshal. In 22, that position, we'll have to fill it because Fire Marshal Kimball will be retiring out of the drop program at the end of the year. But that is budgeted. We have 3 captains, 3 lieutenants, 19 firefighters, and 1 clerical. We do have, for 22, we have 2 drop retirees budgeted in the terminal pay, which is a retirement pay. That's line 708008. And we can go over that. That's $160,058. So go to the next page. We have our revenue. So our tax millage levied on the fire fund is 3.1250. The projected revenue on the taxes is $4,570,215, and that's based on the taxable value minus adjustments and the Renaissance Zone taxable value. And I did go over these at the beginning in September. I know it's been a while. So the taxable value, there was an increase from the prior year of 3.3%. We do have for revenues the projected essential services assessment. That's the ESA. I didn't write that all out in the line items, but that's what that is for. And that's a reimbursement from the state, and it's calculated for the personal property tax losses. And we have that budgeted at $13,000. Then also, we have projected in lieu of taxes from Clark Towers for essential services there. They pay that to the police, the law enforcement, and to the firefighter, and we split those. So that is at $6,000. Oh, I'm sorry. That is in your, if you have your binders, it's page 62 in your binder, and it's page 26 in the packet. The line items for revenue. So if there's any questions on the revenue, that is, like I said, on page 26 of the packet. So if there's no questions there, we'll move on. So the fire fund was made up of different departments. There were 4 different departments in the fire fund in 2020. In 21, we have moved the pension and the capital outlay fund. Both of those have their own separate millages, and now they have their own separate funds. So now in the fire department, the only thing is in there is the civil service department, and that's department number 269, and the general operations department is 336. Okay. Well, we have the expenditures. That's on page 30 of your packet or page 66 in your binder. So I don't know what everybody has. I'll just give both pages so that you kind of know where we're at. So as far as 66. Well, I do have to say page 64 is the civil service. There is no changes there. The civil service is for this civil service department and the officials there, and also the largest expense is the professional service, and that's for testing and any legal fees that would happen. So there really is no change in that department. Any questions on that one? The next page is page 65, or in your packet it would probably be 32, so it's just following down. And that is the pension that we've moved. So you can see for 22, there is nothing there. We've moved that. So on page 66 of your binder, page 30 of the packet is the expenditures. And this is all set up of operations for fire. So you have your personnel, the wages, you got your fringe benefits, any operations, we got communications, fire investigations. This is the operational portion. It does have maintenance and repair for building and vehicles. So those are the big ones there. If you look on the presentation slide, it'll tell you our firefighter contract is a 2.75 increase for 22. The chief's position is a non-union position, but the increase is usually determined by the fire contract. So we have him budgeted for 2.75 increase on that as well. The clerical position is Ask Me, and we do not have any budget increase for 22 in that yet because that's under negotiation. The contracts are under negotiation. And I did put the fringes in here. I did go over them at September, so I thought you'd like to see those again. So the healthcare decrease is at 4.69. And the vision decrease is 24%, and the disability decrease is 24%, and only the clerical has disability insurance in the fire fund. And then the life insurance and dental are no increase for the year for 22. So do we have any questions on the expenditures for line-by-line items that we have for the fire department? We do have narratives for each one of the line items. That is on page 66 in your binder and on page 30 of the packet. Those are not up there. This is just a presentation overview. Okay, we'll move right along. All right, what I have in the presentation is not in your binder. This is a estimated budget fund balance. So this is how it ends up at the end of the year. If you'll see the columns I have is the actual audit column. 2020 is the first one. That's combined. So that has the operations, it has the pension, it has the capital, and of course it has the civil service. That's small. I don't count that one, but that has all three of them in there. So you can see what the estimated revenues, actually that's actual for 2020 because that year is closed, the appropriations for 2020, and the net, we did end in a positive, so that it did increase our fund balance. You can see the beginning fund balance in 2020 was $912,253, and then the positive balance. But that, again, that's because all of those are in there together. And then 21, the original budget had everything in there as well. You can see how that runs down the columns, the revenue, the appropriations, the net, the beginning fund balance. For 2021 is the ending balance of 2020, the $1,392,879. And then on the bottom, that is the $199,201. That is the amount that I need to move from the fund balance that was for 19 and 20 for the capital. That's what they ended up with. So we needed to move that into the new capital fund. So that was right at the beginning of 21. We had said that we needed to move that amount. So that was budgeted. And then the next two columns are the budget amendments that we reduced the budget for the pension and the capital. And you can see where they're negative, so we've moved those out. And then the second to the last one is the 21 amended budget. So that is just for operations and the civil service. So you can see the change, how the change goes down. And we've gone from the $1,392,879. We had to remove the amount that we needed to take from prior year fund balance of the $14,003, and then the $199,203. So that gave us an ending budgeted fund balance, because usually we don't really, probably will not need to use the $14,000, so that'll add on to that. So you take the $1,179,675, that's the beginning for 22. You see the arrow goes up there? And so that is what we're going to be, the estimated fund balance ending for '22, the budgeted estimated balance. And that's at 31% ratio. And like I said before, I like to keep them between 20 and 30% because we just don't know any unforeseen things that are out there. And then these can change very quickly. So, any questions on the fund balance? Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So now we'll go into the fire pension and OPEB millage fund. That's the new fund that we've created for '21. Right, that is on page 38 of the packet for tonight, or page 80 in your binder. And the activity there, the amount, the amended budget was pulled over. So we started with an amended budget for '21. You can see the activity. We have the requested amounts for '22. The levy amount was, the millage was reduced from 1.3300 to 1.1000. The projected tax revenue for this one is $1,608,716, and that, again, that's based on the taxable value minus adjustments and the Renaissance zone taxable value. The increase of the taxable value from prior year was 3.3%, and the ESA on this one is $8,800. So that's the revenue portion. I did go over the pension on the back in September, but I did copy these pages and put them in here because it, you know, we're actually talking about the pension right now. So I did go over all of these before. The amount has decreased from 21 to 22. It was at $1,074,669 for 21, and for 22, the annual required contribution is $975,040. And just to go through these, our funded ratio increased, which is a good thing. It went from 76.61% in 19 to 83.69 in 2020. Asset valuation is at $31,296,842, and the unfunded liability is $6,188. Again, our goal is to try to get these funded as soon as possible, 100%, and then to go ahead and keep contributing. We were in the early 2000s, we were actually at 100% funded, and we stopped contributing. So that led into us going down into the unfunded liability. So what our goal is to get these funded at 100% and still continue to contribute to maintain 100% funded. Any questions on the pension?
Just for history, like, we used to levy 0.4 mils for pension and OPEB, and now it's 1.12. I'm not sure. I don't have the thing.
It's currently at 1.1 mils.
So 1.1. So we increased it to pay the actuarial and to keep, like Joe said, to keep it funded, because one change in the actuarial
Assumptions could cause it to go up or down.
We went from 80-some% down to 60% because they changed some of the actuarial numbers. So there's so many
Mortality rate,
factors that
the
go.
interest rate,
It's,
there's a lot of things.
there's
that
so
go
many factors that go into it that, but our goal is to get it at 100% funded, so that, and we need to contribute some above the 100% in order to absorb the market losses that we could have or changes in actuarial.
The next up is our fire, oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Newman?
Yeah, I just had a Okay. Is the fire pension, does it have a separate millage?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So if you go back a slide for me, one slide.
Was that included in the,
No, that's a handout that should be on your,
okay,
that's the green handout, that's page
All right.
8.
okay. So, I mean, did we vote on it this last time?
The millage, that was back in the summer, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was just going to say, when we set the L 4029,
Uh-huh.
that's when we set our levies. And
Okay.
we do that every year. We set the amount that we're going to levy, and it's based on the actuarial amounts for OPEB and pension. So it changes.
Yeah, but we as a people don't vote on that.
Yes, we do vote on it.
Okay,
Because when we vote on, that it's a form, that has our L 4029, and it has all the different millage levies.
yeah,
Yeah, we have to vote on that every year.
okay. As a board?
Oh, I'm sorry, you meant, did the people vote on it?
Yeah,
Years ago, in the 60s, they voted on it.
okay. Yeah, I mean, was it in the part of what we voted on as a population?
Yeah, in the early 60s, and it's
Okay.
perpetual, and it never comes back before us,
Oh, really? Okay.
but before the voters, but it comes before this board every year, and we determine the levy amount in order to cover the pension and OPEB liability.
And those numbers are determined by the accounting director, or actuarial?
Yeah, the
Yes.
actuarial gives us the numbers that we need,
The
and then,
annual required contribution that we have to submit to our pension and our OPEB. If we don't contribute the minimum amount, the annual required contribution, we have to actually do a big write-up to the state.
Because it has to be funded at a certain amount.
That is correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, we can move forward. All right, we're on the OPEB healthcare. That is still part of the pension and OPEB millage. These are, again, Trustee Newman, we're going over the slides that I had for September. I had already presented these, but I just wanted to put them in here because we're dealing with specifically this pension fund. So I wanted to put those in there to kind of show you, the amounts that the annual required contribution, where our rates, our funded ratios are. And I just want to point out, because that's really good, our funded ratio increased from 49.9% in 19 to 67.7% in 2020. So it's a big jump. We've been trying to contribute a little bit extra as we can. You can see in 21, we did do a little bit more than what was required from us. And in 2022, I have scheduled the annual required contribution is only $635,017, and we have budgeted just a little bit more, $6,042,476. So just a little bit more budgeted, and always we're trying to pay a little bit more so that we can get 100% funded as fast as we can. So if there's no questions, no specific questions on the OPEB retirement, we'll move forward.
Is there a
Yes,
time
Trustee
when we
Swanson.
were 100% funded, or is this just
Yes,
something
back
that
in the
we're
early,
always?
well, we've never been in the OPEB. That is something, new requirement that happened early in the early 2000s. We are at above the normal rate that the state wants us to be, above 40%. So we've been above that amount, but we've never hit 100% on the OPEB. On the pension, we were at 100%, and we weren't required to make contributions. But what we failed to realize is that any of the assumptions that are made during those time periods affects your funding. Of course, the mortality rates, interest rates, demographic, just all kinds of things that go into that actuarial calculation that they do. We should have been actually contributing even at 100%, at least some minimum amounts to keep us at the 100%. So then we did slip down to the 80s, 80% funded. And then as Supervisor Stumbo had said, it only took 1 year to drop from 80 down to 70% because of the assumption changes that were made. Excuse me. So. All right, so we'll move on to the next fund, and that is our fire capital fund. That is on page 82 in your binder and in page 40 in the packet. It has the line by line and the narratives all in those. So on this one, we did have, this is one that was not voted on over the summer, was in the fall by our voters. This was one that was we already had in place for a 5-year period. It ends in 22, which is 23's revenue. So this one, the tax millage was reduced for 22 it went from 0.4935 to 0.4881, and that was due to the Headley rollback. The Headley rollback is when the annual growth on the existing properties grow greater than the rate of inflation. Then we get a Headley rollback, and we're told that we have to go back so much of a refraction to get that amount. So our projected revenue is at $713,831, and the taxable value is what we do the calculations on, and that was increased by 3.3% from prior year. And on this one, the ESA, which is the Essential Services Assessment, they do get a portion of that. That's at $2,250. So that is the revenue.
When it's said about taxable value, that's assuming that the properties will appreciate?
I am so sorry I didn't have my microphone on.
Okay.
The taxable value is already set by our assessors. So
Right.
the amount that I'm using here is set for the year. So we already know what that is, and when we do the calculations on that. That's why I based my calculations on the taxable values.
Oh,
Yeah.
They already give it to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so that's already turned into the state. She's already got state authorization on
All
those.
right. Thank you.
That's also on our L4029. So all of this tells you what your taxable value is minus your Renaissance zone, and then we can calculate out what millages and how much is going to levy, and then this board votes on it, and they send it to the county and to the state. So taxable value is on that L4029 as well.
It's right on the top. Yeah.
That's the first thing we do in order to begin to prepare the budget. That
And
we
there's
have
an
to have that number.
L4025 and a 29 that the assessor has stuff to do with. That's not part that comes down here, but she files that with the county and the state. So that's already pre-done. The assessing department does that. So. Okay. And we got our, okay, we move on to our expenditures, which is on page 80. Whoop. Oh, I went too far. So our capital is on page 83 in your binder. And in the packet, it would be 41. Okay. Okay. In the expenditures for 2022's request is 80,000 for improvement, also for 130,000 for the fire station, and 550,000 for apparatus. So, and I've got them listed on this sheet here. So the improvement for the fire station and the two improvement ones are to replace the roof on station number 4 and the repaving of the lot in 4. So there's some of we've not really done anything in almost 10 years on these stations. That's why we did need to go and get a capital improvement special millage. Yes, Trustee Newman.
I know I always ask this, but is there a list of capital projects?
Yeah, yes, we do have that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll send that out. It's in 2 or 3 different places. We don't have one nice section, but I do have for each one of the funds we have.
All right, thank you.
I had a question. Just if you could refresh in my mind, I think we did do one parking lot of one fire station. What fire station was that? Was it 2 or something?
That's the main one.
We completed, I believe it was in the 2017 budget, the parking lot at our fire headquarters on Ford Boulevard.
Fort Boulevard.
Okay, last year, or on this year, the 21 budget, we had budgeted for Station 3. Under advisement from OHM, we thought it would be better for us to forego the bid process on that this year and take it out next spring. We should get a better price to have that work completed.
So I remember you were going to do one of them. I couldn't remember which one. So you're going to move it forward to the spring.
Yes, I have a capital outlay for all the 3 stations, a plan, a pamphlet, if you would, please. And Station 4 is scheduled for next year. Station 3 was scheduled for this year, but because of the financial constraints, he thought it'd be, and COVID, he thought it'd be better to move it to the spring.
Okay, thank you.
And while I'm up, I'm going to give kudos to the attorney who architected this 2018 capital improvement millage, and that has gone a long way for us to maintain our facilities. This is not about wages and benefits, but just so that we can
Just to maintain.
keep our equipment and maintain our facilities.
Thank you.
So Chief, I need to ask, if we're pushing the Station 3 into 22, do I need to increase the budget? Because I only have what you had put down for Station 4, for roof replacement and parking lot repaving on Station 4. So do we need to push some funds in for number 3?
Negative.
Okay,
Negative. We had that conversation about doing an amendment.
okay. All right, so that would be an amendment to bring back toward the board then for those projects.
So can I just clarify? So I know Textile and Hewitt. Which one, like,
Which
is
one is 3?
Textile number?
Textile 8879 is Station 4,
Okay.
and 20 South Hewitt is Station number 3.
And so is number 2?
It used to be on Holmes Road, but it was closed prior to me coming here.
Okay.
So I don't know what year it was closed. I want to say 2006, I don't know. Yeah,
That property still falls in the fire, like, responsibilities? So if something was to happen to that building, or is that?
it's a substation for the county sheriff's.
We
I
move the
believe.
police services pays
For that?
the maintenance, and they operate out of there for, if they need to go in there and write a report, or they have meetings in there, they use it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. right, so we can go on to our environmental services. That's 84 in your binder and page 42 in the packet. This one has a millage. The millage on this one is at, the millage on this one is at 2.4050. It previously was approved from, the previous amount of the levy was 2.1550, and currently it moved up. The voters voted to move it up to 2.4050, and that was a result from a shift from the law enforcement fund. The levy on that one went from 5.95 to 5.7. So it was just a shifting of those levied amounts, so that millages, so that we could get more into the environmental services fund, which is where we needed the extra. The projected tax revenue is $3,517,337, and again, it's based on the taxable value. The ESA on this one is budgeted at $9,600. So those are the funds that are sent from the state to make up for our loss in personal property taxes. See, within the environmental fund, this is a big thing with waste management. It's just basically a lot of waste management's expenses. We do have some staff. We have 50% of a supervisor. We have 50% of a mechanic. We have 75% for each one of the clerical in that fund. So we do have wages, and we do have some fringes in there, but it's not a lot of those. That's not one of the biggest ones. So if you look at the expenditure lines, which is on page 85 and 43 in your packet, so it's line by line. If you look down the page, it's almost in the middle of the expenditure page, where you'll see the contractual amounts. Those are the big amounts. You see the amount for the waste management. We have a 5-year contract with them. It increases 4% every year. If you go to the next page. See, on this one, I think I've shown these before. These are ones where we were doing the forecast. It shows you the rate changes and the dates of the contracts. This is per unit. Those amounts are per unit, and there is 15,116 units. So you multiply each one of those by that to get the amount. And the next page on the slides shows how we get the amounts for the actual budget. So in the blue section, that is the contract from January 1st of 22 to September 30th. And then the one in the orange is from October 1st through December 31st. We are on a calendar year. They are not. They are on their fiscal year is from October 1st through September. So we had to kind of push them together to actually get the amounts that we needed for the budget. And on the blue column on the last, that $1,524,273, that is what's actually budgeted on the sheet. So those are where we get the numbers to move to our sheet here. So you'll see those down in the middle of the thing. So the last numbers, if you're looking at the last numbers, they're 804,001, 804,003, 804,007, 804,008. Those are on page 85 of your binder, or 43 in your packet. I believe it's 43. It is, okay. Does anybody have any questions on anything in the Environmental Services Fund? Yes, Trustee Newman?
I was was looking at the emergency services chipper expense, and is that, I thought, wasn't it decided not to have chipping services, or are these different?
Which line are you looking at?
Let's see. I thought it was in. The amount was 40,000. Let's see, it's,
Contractual services?
yeah, it was contractual services
Okay, that's-
line 818.
Okay, 818. I believe we put that in there in case there was an emergency, and we actually had to hire somebody to come and pick up the branches. I think that's what that was put in there for, because we didn't want to do that. The liability on our employees, it's a really dangerous job.
Okay,
And so if we needed to, if a big storm came through and we needed to have extra, somebody come in and do it, we would
okay.
Yeah,
pay to
the
have that
board
done.
had directed
Yes.
us to at least see if we can get someone else to do it in case, when there's a storm and stuff.
Okay,
So,
okay, instead of us.
yes,
Okay,
yeah, so that. and we
That's
got
why,
one
that's
quote, it was-
emergency, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, that was a good question. Okay. Any other questions on environmental services?
I just wondered, I know that I've seen on Facebook residents posting like something doesn't get picked up, or, so what happens? Because a contract's really expensive and a contract goes both ways. So how do we handle it when we're paying this kind of money for it and like residents didn't get the service that day? Like, do they call the
They-
township? What happens?
Well, it depends on what it is. Now, I know we have clerical staff that answer phones and help people out. If it's bulk items are picked up differently now, you have to call and schedule. Before, we could just leave them out. Now you have to call and schedule. So we have to, it's more of an education to our residents on, how we need to have them pick up. Again, the brush, they will pick that up. They have to be a certain diameter. You have to bundle them in I think it's a 2-foot. Anyway, there's certain, they'll still do it, but there's just, specific parameters now that people will have to follow. And it's just up to us to try to educate them. We have sent out flyers,
Yeah, but I think she's
postcards,
talking about
mailers.
if they miss garbage, or they miss yard waste, or they miss recycling. That's what I see posted.
I see
Oh, I'm
people
sorry.
posting that, like, their bins weren't picked up that day. So what happens then? Because I'm thinking, like, contractually.
Well, what they do is they call our residential services, and then we, or they'll send in a web complaint, and then we'll be made aware of it, and then we contact Waste Management. And I have to say that they've had some issues. They purchased another company, correct?
Yeah, so
Mike Hoffman?
that's Mike Hoffmeister, Residential Services Director. Thank you. I forget about that. So yes, Waste Management is experiencing staff shortages, just like everyone else is in the world. And they have actually subcontracted out waste collection to other waste collection firms or organizations to help with our contract. And I would assume that they're doing that in other municipalities. So unfortunately, because they are using new people or subcontractors, they are less familiar with our community than our regular people are. We have been experiencing a lot of missed routes, missed roads, missed homes. There are a couple homes in very unique spaces that our normal crews would remember, and the new folks just don't know. So what happens is we hear about it very quickly from the residents. Our clerical, and that's not a bad thing. We want to know about those things. Our clerical staff have a great relationship with the boots on the ground with Waste Management. Pierre is the foreman for our route, and he's fantastic. He responds quickly to Carly and Shauna's requests for addresses or streets or roads missed, and they respond as quickly as possible, utilizing the trucks that they have and the staff that are on the roads. So worst case, they get it the next day. We push them very hard to make sure they get it the same day, if not the next day. But Supervisor Stumble is not wrong in the fact that we are dealing with some issues with them due to short-staffed and unfamiliarity with our community. So, but we do, our staff react very quickly to a missed street, a missed house, a missed bin or what have you, but.
And then we tell them yard waste, and the new contract says in 2 days they'll pick it up.
That's correct.
So our new contract our old one had a quality assurance clause in it, and this one does not as much as the old one did. And their service is just, it's gone downhill. It has. But we stay on them, and even after hours, texting them and saying, hey, you missed this route, can you go back and get it? And they'll miss the same street more than once. I mean, there's quality issues.
And outside of our clerical staff, I have also gotten involved and communicated with our immediate office rep, if you are, our account manager, Brian Conaway, and explained to him our dissatisfaction in the last 6 months or so. So he's fully aware as well.
But they merged with they bought out another company.
They did.
I can't remember the name
either.
of it, but they did a merger too. And so that's what we do. We document it, we keep a list of it, and we report it, and then we'll meet with them, especially when it gets really bad, and review everything with them. But they openly admit they don't have enough staff. So that's a hard one to make happen.
Go ahead,
I know I can say on a couple of occasions our block was missed because we live in a cul-de-sac, and when I've called and spoke to Carly, it was taken care of, if not the next day. Like on one time, it was like a Friday, and I called her at 4 o'clock, so I knew, nobody was coming until Monday, but it was taken care of. And then another time it was missed, it was like that next day. So, it is being addressed. And she explained it to me as well.
Lori?
Mike, have you got complaints about, and I thank you for telling us that, because if there's short of staff, I guess we understand that. There's nothing you could do about that until they hire. But are you getting complaints that they are coming later in the routes? Because we're kind of noticing they're coming later and they're resurfacing through at a later time. Also, complaints to me about with the leaf bags, that they won't pick them up, they'll go buy them if the bags are not folded down properly. If sticks are sticking up, I had a complaint that they're going by them. I said, hey, can you tape them down, not tape them down, but roll them down, put them back out there and see if they get them. So are they really being that precise? Are you getting any complaints about it?
Not necessarily. We do know that the different truck comes through at different times of the day, and we do hear from certain residents stating that they'll see their recycling get collected, but not their yard waste. They'll call us and inform us of that, and then we'll just inform them that the yard waste truck might be following behind. So we've not heard specific issues or complaints from residents about nitpicking the style that their yard waste is rolled or not rolled. But I can certainly get with Carly to see if she's heard issues, but I'm not familiar with anything that I've heard.
One of the residents wanted to know, so I just told them, hey, put it back out there.
Yeah.
See what happens.
And just
if
have
they
them-
actually pick them up,
And call us and let us know, or email us, and then RSD, we keep track of everything and all the
Just
issues
want
that
to
we
know
have.
if you heard of anybody.
I haven't heard that
complain.
one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My only concern is that we just had residents graciously pass a millage and for a lot of money, and so I appreciate everybody in the township staying on it. If they're short on staff, I can appreciate that too, because everybody is, but it just could make it harder to pass things that are needed if people pass it, and then all of a sudden, we have a past millage and then the services seem to be on the decline. So that's just something, I mean, I don't know what we can do about it, but it's something that we want to be aware of because could be hard to pass millages and we don't want that to be what happens.
That was very good. I didn't know that, so I learned something. Mine gets picked up. I'm on a main kind of road, though. I would notice if mine didn't get picked up. It's like, so, but, yes. So is there any more questions that we have on environmental while we've got Mike here to answer any questions? All right, I've got a handout of the estimated budget fund balance. Kind of give you a picture of the history of the fund balance and the percentage of the fund balance of the appropriations. And you can see in 19 and 20, it was at 39 and 36%. And then the budgeted amount for 21 was at 26%. And it is now at 29% in 22. Now, these are budgeted amounts, not the actual fund balance, because we can't give that until the end of the year. The ones for 2019 and 2020 are the actual amounts and the ratios. But 21 and 22 are still budget. And the reason it's at 29% is because we did increase the millage, and the taxable value did go up by 3.3%. So that helped that go up to that 29%. But again, it's a 4% increase each year from waste management. So, you know, like I said, I like to have those between 20 and 30% so that if anything happens, as you can see, it went from 39 to 29 within just like 3 years. So, any questions on the fund balance spreadsheet? Next is our hydro station. That's 115 in your binder, or 118 if you don't have the new amount. So it's probably 118. And the packet, it's on page 48. Now, the reason I'm saying that on these, we did have the health care, I did adjust, so the amounts of the health care is down in all of these spreadsheets that you just received.
And that was one of my questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I did forget to tell you that at the beginning. I put all of the new healthcare amounts in there, so that decreased a lot of the expenditures.
You mean in here or?
On the one that you received in the packet.
Okay, the one, okay, yep. 'Cause
In the
I was
packet.
All right.
Yeah. So on the hydro station, we do have Mike Saranen here. He's our manager of the dam, very experienced and knowledgeable. I can let him go ahead and answer any questions for you. We've got the projected revenue at $440,000, but I will let him go ahead and answer any questions that you have, either on the revenue or the expenditures on this. Lisa, do you want to go to the next one? That's the expenditures, because there's not a whole lot in the revenues. It's just what we make off of the electricity from the dam. And then on the expenditures, not a lot has changed on that except for the capital accounts that we have. And I do have the last 6 numbers on each one of these slides. And I'll let Mike actually kind of go over these capital projects.
Good evening, Mike Sarnon, Operation Manager. And for the 2022 budget, we have a couple capital projects that we have planned. The first one is the 971001. This is a stress analysis to determine the safety factor of our existing spillway gates. Those gates are from the 1930s, they're original to the project. And the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, has requested us determine the safety factor and to see if those are going to be in need of replacement in the near future. Based on the overall design of the project, I think they'll come back fine. But everything does have a life shelf or service life. There's also talk of working on some aging concrete that's showing parts of a little bit of rebar. Those spalling areas would like to get corrected before it becomes a major project. One of the challenges with that activity is the historical state SHPO, the State Historic Office. Will have to get approval through them, and their project their involvement might delay the construction season by 1 year. So we're going to try to tackle next year with that one. So, and for that 971001, we're estimating those costs about $270,000. The next one is the 976000 for grant projects. We are trying to work with our local River Watershed Council and with Eagle, which is the old DEQ, to work to see if we can find ways to work on shoreline stabilization and other water quality improvements. So right now, it looks like unless the grant is written a little differently, we might not be able to go forward next year under that project. So that might get removed next year if it doesn't move forward. And lastly, the 977000 for $25,000 is to replace some aging, outdated water quality equipment. We've been having some operational errors with the lake buoy equipment that is in there. So from back in the Dr. Lehman's days when he was studying the lake in 2003, so they have quite a few years of service under them. That particular equipment is no longer being made, and the service parts are starting to get scarce. So we're hoping to get a part of a grant through Eagle under a separate project to help pay for a good majority of that. So depending on the grant award, if we can get that, we might be able to do at least 2 to 3 sensors, if not more. So those are the major projects for 2022.
Does anyone have any questions, other questions? Okay. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Our last fund of the day is our motor pool fund. This is an internal fund. We use this fund to pay for vehicles. The vehicles are purchased through the motor pool fund, and each fund that has a vehicle will then pay back the motor pool fund. They also will pay for any routine maintenance on those vehicles. And after they are paid off, usually a 5-year period back to the motor pool, then they still do maintain a maintenance fee that they end up paying back to the motor pool. And this gives us the opportunity to maintenance the vehicles, the normal maintenance, tires, oil, wipers, just maintenance stuff. If the transmission drops, then it's going to have to be on the department, the fund, to pay for that. That's an extreme expenditure. But other than that, that's kind of how that fund works. Also, we do request refunds back from internal funds for any gas, diesel fuel that's been used. So that's the 2 main revenue sources that you'll see coming into the motor pool. We do have to have appropriated prior year fund balance to balance out the fund this year for the 2020. This is new, so you won't have that in your book. And the reason being is in our expenditures. If you'll look at the expenditures, we do not have anything budgeted in 2022 for any vehicles. We are bringing to the board's request tonight to actually purchase a vehicle. I'll let Michael go ahead and explain.
Sure. So if you remember, you approved RSD staff to go to bid for a new OCS vehicle with their staff increases and changes. We did get 2 bids, and maybe we'll review this at the time of the agenda review, but we did receive 2 bids. The lead time for vehicles, again, due to supply chain issues, is 16 to 18 weeks. So while tonight you'll be asked to approve the purchase, we'll have to budget the amount for the vehicle in next year's budget because we cannot pay until we receive the vehicle. So while you'll see zero maybe on your document, it's going to end up at $28,000, which is just above the vehicle purchase price.
Yes, trustee Newman?
Are we paying for vehicles a one-time only, or are we financing them?
We're not financing any of the vehicles. The motor pool will pay for the vehicle. That's if we have the fund balance. That's why they have to check before they ask to even come to you to go out for bidding to see if we have money available to buy the vehicles. And then we buy the vehicles, and then the funds, each one of the fund would pay back over a 5-year period, just like a
Okay.
loan. It's just back
Right.
to the internal
I get it.
account.
Okay.
Right, and then as we were talking about this one here, so there is nothing budgeted on your sheet. That's an update that I'll have to do. So on the last line item for the capital assets, or capital outlay for vehicles, we're going to put that at 28,000. And what that is they're, actually this year, they will do the purchase request and a PO, which will encumber the amount in 21, but we are not going to pay for it until 22. So we have to have those funds, moving on into 23 to take care of the encumbered PO. Is there any questions on how we work that? And any other questions on any of the expenditures in the motor pool? There's not a whole lot in this one. Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, that completes my presentation.
We have one more meeting to go through 3 other funds and then set the public hearing. We're rolling right along. Now, we have a zoning ordinance update, so do you want to take a little break now, or do you want to wait till, and then stop at 6:30? Stop another, we'll go another hour, then we'll stop at 6:30. Okay. Because we're sitting a long time here, folks. All right. Yeah, we have a regular board meeting at 7, yeah, so it's just, I know it's a long meeting, so. All right. Then we'll do a hard stop at 6:30 or 6:40 and take a little break before our meeting. All right, next up is Jason. And is Ben coming too, or no?
No, just the two of us.
Megan?
Good evening, Township Board. I'm Jason Icawangeli, the Township's Planning Director. With me this evening is Miss Megan Masson-Manak from Carlisle Wortman and Associates. Megan's been an integral part of the Carlisle Wortman team working on the zoning ordinance along with myself, Belinda Kingsley, Mr. McLean from McLean and Winters, as well as Angela King, not to mention other township staff. This process has been a long time coming. The zoning ordinance is sort of the keystone of the foundation of everything that's been built to date. The master plan being the foundation of our community for the next 20 years. The zoning ordinance being the keystone that guides everything from here forward. It sets the policy or law for the community and will dictate into the future how the township envisions its development being. There's some significant changes in the zoning ordinance for the better that we'll definitely go over with you over the next 2 work sessions that we have lined up. And there's a lot of things that remain the same, and we'll go over those with you as well. So this is the first of just 2 workshops that we've split the ordinance into 2 different sections. This evening, we're going to be doing articles, I believe it's 1 through 7, and then we're going to do 8 through 19 the second time. We've been through this exercise already with the Planning Commission and gotten their feedback on these articles that are included, and so far there hasn't been any significant concerns. There have been a few issues raised, but I think that they're broader topics that probably are best discussed in the future after the adoption of this zoning ordinance, as this is pretty crucial part of what we do on a day-to-day basis and kind of shapes the way that the community is going to look like moving forward. If you could go to the next slide, please. So again, the purpose this evening is to start going through these articles with you to get a familiarity of some of the things that have changed in the zoning ordinance and to go over those topics with you and get your feedback. This is being done based on the master plan and the things that are considered in there. And this is going to start to set the stage for that quality development that we currently have, but this will bring it a step forward and implement some things that we haven't seen as a community as of yet. Some of those bigger things, changes being mixed-use development, form-based development, more urban scale development where buildings are allowed to be a little bit taller, a little bit closer to roads and sidewalks than they otherwise wouldn't be. This is a departure from some of the suburban code that was written in here, over the years, like every other community. And in here is the ability to redevelop some of our corridors, including Washtenaw Avenue and East Michigan Avenue. And then Huron is a relatively new corridor. There's also provisions in this ordinance that will lay the groundwork for that corridor as well. But certainly our older and more established corridors like East Michigan Avenue and Washtenaw Avenue, this new ordinance will breathe new life into those areas by allowing infill development, taller development, a more and higher mix of uses and development in those areas. And then not to miss out E-Course Road, again, Huron corridor will also have some treatments that are kind of prescribed in this zoning ordinance. And again, we'll go over all of that with you, and I'm actually looking forward to it. So just briefly, some of the next steps will be to, again, meet with you folks at another workshop at your next meeting in this sort of format. And we'll certainly answer questions between now and then that may arise, so don't feel like you have to get your questions in this evening. If something comes up, certainly between now and the next meeting, me and Megan will be happy to answer any of those questions you might have. But the next formal step in this process would be to hold a public hearing at the Planning Commission on November 23rd, and we'll publish for that meeting per the state law and get comments from the public at that time. So there was a lot there. Without further ado, I'd introduce Megan Masson-Manak from Carlisle Wortman. She'll kind of lead us off, and we'll kind of get started on going through the articles and the zoning map this evening and answer any questions that you folks might have.
Good evening. Again, Megan Masson-Manak. I don't believe I've met Trustee Swanson or Trustee Newman, so happy to meet you. And if you have any questions about planning and zoning, we're always available. It's been our pleasure to work on this since 2019. We started way back before the pandemic on this project, just after the master plan was completed. Really want to thank your staff, and especially Jason and Belinda, who worked tirelessly on this, and we're on many a Zoom call with myself and Ben Carlisle and Denny McLean, and of course Doug Winters. Everybody really has contributed to this. And at first, in 2019, we came to the development team, the township board, and the planning commission with a series of workshops and got some input. We used that as a guide and started drafting, but of course, pandemic, things change. We rebooted the project in 2021, and again, those intensive sessions that I just mentioned. And as Jason said, we've had 2 work sessions with the planning commission. Go to the next one. What I'd like to do tonight, and I know you have limited time and bandwidth and want to eat, and so you're prepared for your public meeting. We always have the next session too, and when we did this with the Planning Commission, we did have to have a little bit of a pivot in terms of saying we're going to take questions the next time on Articles 1 through 7. It just takes a while to digest all this. So what I'd like to do tonight is to go over the zoning map first, and that's the piece of paper I handed to you earlier while Jason was talking. And then after going over those, really pause and have some questions for all the proposed changes on the map, because that's really the skeleton of the zoning ordinance, the districts and where they are and what they are. And then walk through Articles 1 through 7 and take questions after review of each article. But I'd like to check with you and make sure that fits with what you're comfortable with in terms of having this being a productive work session. Okay, I'm seeing general nods. So I'll take it that we can go to the next slide. And also, what I want to emphasize is there's no such thing as a silly question. The chair of the Planning Commission, actually, last time she had a lot of questions, and what she felt was maybe inconsequential really led to really good discussions. And so I would just encourage you, if there's any questions, just let us know. And one thing that did come up in that is in your binder that you all got, all of the changes that are proposed to the text are in the colored ink, whether it's red, whether it's purple, whether it's blue. Those are just, we had multiple different users making edits, and that's how Word tracks it. So I apologize that it was not just one color, but so that the color differentiation in ink doesn't mean anything. It just means that it's a change, whether it's purple or whether it's red. What's up right now is your existing zoning map, and if you glance at that and then you glance at the one that we've given you, you'll see that there are a lot more districts in the current zoning map than what's being proposed. Also, there's a bunch of different categories. And one of the things, the goals was to simplify the process, but also to simplify the map and the zoning ordinance, but also to have a little more truth in advertising. Anybody who's familiar with zoning or planning will know I1, I2, I3, I4. As you go up in numbers, that means in intensity, but the average person does not. So if you could go to the next one. What we tried to do was to, again, simplify it, so you'll notice there's less colors, and also a few less categories. One of the things that I wanted to point out here is what's not changing. So the locations and regulations of everything on those first 5 categories are 1 through R5. Those are your single-family districts. Those locations, if it's single family right now, it's going to remain single family. So if it's R1 right now, it's going to remain R1. If it's R5, it's going to remain R5. And there's no regulations that are really changing that affect the single family neighborhoods. There are a few parcels that are currently now zoned a multiple family that in discussions with the development team, it was felt that they're undeveloped parcels at this point. And it was felt that those would be more appropriate as single family due to the congestion on the roads that would be caused by multiple family and pressure on infrastructure, especially with stormwater. Stormwater and roads are 2 things that are out of the township's control because it's the Water Resources Commission and the Road Commission. So there are a few parcels that have transitioned from multiple family to single family. But in terms of communicating to your residents, their zoning essentially is not going to change. Could go to the next slide. So keep that zoning map in front of you as I go through the next couple of slides, and then I will try to pause and count to my head in 5 at the end of each one to make sure that if anybody has a question, we'll do it. A major change is that what's being proposed is an agricultural overlay. And that's that green hatch. And you'll see that you can see the color underneath it. So what that means is that color underneath it, it's usually yellow, a bright yellow, means that houses could still be built per that R1 zoning, but that a farm is enabled there. And where we put that hatch is only where you have functioning farm operations currently, and it's in the southern part of the township where we've master planned that we want to preserve and encourage agriculture. So what that hatch does is then it allows other uses in additional to those underlying uses. Think of it like a contact lens. And we're also proposing in the zoning ordinance to allow farm operations to have other uses that help them get through their season, whether it's agritourism, corn mazes, tasting rooms, events. You have lots of these, but also small-scale on-site processing, maybe a vineyard, maybe our micro distillery that might have a tasting room. But these all would be proposed as special land uses, so it would have a public hearing, and the neighbors would be notified, and there's a higher level of scrutiny and more ability to say no. So that's what's proposed in that overlay. In terms of whether somebody could come and request that overlay in the future, what would have to happen is they would have to be on your future land use map. There are areas that are designated for future agricultural development and preservation. They would have to be that color and be in that area in order to qualify to have the agricultural overlay. Because we've been asked in questions in terms of like urban farms, especially in the northern part of the township, would this enable that? And the answer is no, because it links, if you read the intent of that section, it links right back to the master plan and where they say that it's farm preservation. So, any questions on the ag overlay? Yes. Oh,
Go ahead.
I just had a question. I'm thinking if the AATA is looking to expand down Washtenaw Avenue, so for that, does that have to be rezoned if they add a lane?
no.
Okay.
No. All of the zoning is outside the street right away. So it's all it's what you, township, allow in terms of land uses on private property.
Did that answer your question? Yeah, it's in the road right away, yeah. But so I heard you say that anything outside the agricultural overlay would need to be a special land use, or even inside?
Inside, so those a farm operation would be a permitted use, and all those things that come with a farm operation, including keeping of animals, which are regulated by the state and allowed. And they'd have to meet GAMPs, generally accepted agricultural management practices. And if anybody wants to know more about that, please call me. We'll probably have a 2-hour conversation. And Jason and your attorney can also help you on those. But in terms of like, additional, let's say, for instance, Smoking Barrels Ranch, which is an operating vineyard in your township, would like to have a tasting room and maybe host events. So they would have to come through a special land use process to do that.
Okay.
And
if it's agriculture, does that include any type of plants or?
It doesn't include plants that would be regulated by the federal government. So for instance, like growing of hemp or growing of marijuana, that would not be part of it.
And that's in our other proposed zoning district as well?
Yes, that's in the IC.
So that's not included in the agriculture?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
So I have a question about, I understand the agriculture on the north side. I understand why that won't work. But what about areas that are currently green spaces that aren't parks? So I'm specifically thinking about areas that were former schools, where schools have been demolished and there's green space. And are you going to get to like what the plan is for that? Because I would have some concerns about the fact that increasing density in areas where there's already density seems like it could hurt us in the long run if right now there's not a need for a school. It doesn't seem like it would be wise for us to have zoning that would allow all that to be filled in. And then in the future, long term, if there needed to be schools, for us to have to create a situation where we're busing large numbers of kids because the density is already in the north side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it was discussed at our last development team meeting, when we were looking at this draft ordinance, and it had already been sent to everyone, but the feeling of the development team, this issue of school-owned property that's no longer used for schools came up. And what it was felt was that whatever adaptive reuse of those lands would be, should be a special land use. We have that edit, we'll update the draft. And so, again, that special land use, what it triggers is as a public hearing, and that everybody in 300 feet is notified by mail. It can also, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Winters or Supervisor Stumbo, that we also discussed that that decision would have to go to the township board, because in the zoning ordinance, there are some special land uses that are decided by the planning commission, and there are some decided by the township board. And it was a feeling of the development team that because of the history with the school district and the way things have been used, that extra layer of scrutiny is needed, and that decision needs to be done by the township board. Am I characterizing that correctly in terms of the conversation? So, and in terms of, there are a couple of limitations, though. If the school keeps the property and they decide to have an educational component with a farm, that you, township, don't have control over that because of state laws that have separated educational uses away from the powers of the zoning powers of a municipality. So does that answer or help give you context?
It does. I guess one of my primary concerns is that you can see how the north side of the township was developed around this idea of community, around shared community green space with the school. Specifically, even with the township connected parks in some cases to schools. If long-term individuals are making short-term decisions, and it was already previously developed as a way to have green space and community space, it's vital for the neighborhoods in that area to have what they can't have because the south side has open space, and they have kind of protected open space in this way. So my concern is just that other area that right now somebody sees there's no need. But if we're thinking really long-term in the future, we can't determine that. And once you fill something in, it gets very hard to take that back in an area where there is no way to take it back.
So in terms of using zoning as a tool, that extra level of scrutiny from the special land use is probably the best tool that you have, aside from zoning it to a public use category, which you don't have now, nor is it proposed, nor is it good planning practice, just because when you have that public use category and you get to the point where you have been and the school district is looking to sell it or whatnot, when it has to go through that rezoning, it really becomes fraught and without a good process to do it. However, I think what we would recommend, and I think what's stated in the master plan, is in order for healthy communities, you need safe open space, and to look at ways to purchase that property or have others purchase those properties and have programs on them that preserve those properties as green spaces, which are healthy, accessible, safe green spaces for neighborhoods. And zoning may not be the best tool to do that.
Last comment would be, unfortunately, these are areas that are in our high need from an opportunity index areas. So I want us to be really mindful of that idea.
The school is basically demolishing property and it's vacant land, and they just want to sell it to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
But it's zoned single family in the map.
Right.
The vacant parcels. And we just want to make sure that part of that is preserving the open space. Because they had the open space with the schools, but then they demolished it, it's more open space, and they just want to infill it big time. And we've had one meeting with the county, and they just want to use every inch of the land. And that's what you're talking about, to make sure that everyone has open space preserved. And so we have to do that through planning when they submit a site plan.
Right.
But you didn't increase the density
No.
on any of it from,
No.
right. So whatever could have been allowed before is still allowed. It's not business, so I think we have to do it that way.
So traditionally, from a planning perspective, neighborhood schools carry the same zoning as the rest of the neighborhood. So a lot of the schools on the north side of town are either zoned, the property's either zoned R5 or R4. Whereas, to your point, historically, neighborhoods were built around the school because it provided that community anchor. And then as greenfield development became more in style, school districts started buying up farm fields in order to build schools, et cetera. And now we're left with those school buildings that are left in neighborhoods. And, you know, as we know, they get reused for different things. And so we want to try to accommodate the school districts and the reuse of their buildings to make sure that what goes inside of them is community friendly and helps the neighborhood. But at the same time, I think to answer your question, the underlying zoning that's there, none of that will change. It's going to just stay as it is, which is basically the underlying zoning for the neighborhood. In order to preserve that open space through the master plan, there would be targeted areas where the township may step in time and purchase property in order to preserve it for open space, for connections either to parks or for community facilities or things of that nature, if the school ever decides that they want to sell the property or move forward or demo a building or something along those lines. So keeping the zoning in place consistent with what's in the neighborhood is always sort of we're not recommending a zoning change that would be out of character for the neighborhood. And it's such time that the township ever felt that there was a need to get involved with the school district to have discussions on the preservation of a school or open space or what the use of the building might be. We'd certainly be all ears to have that conversation.
Well, and I'm grateful that we're mindful of that, just because we have multiple school systems, and the school system that I'm most concerned about does not have space to expand should they need to in the future, because that school district is Ypsilanti City and the north side of the township. There is no way to expand should someone make a mistake now and then decide 20 years from now, we need to do something. On the south side, we can do that. There's space, they could do that. They have that luxury. The north side does not. So people have to be very forward-thinking about how that's going to happen to protect the residents and the value of the homes of the people who live on that side of town. So I won't beat a dead horse, but I just wanted to be
It's a
very
valid point.
mindful of it.
So, and again, probably planning and park planning and open space planning, and also taking advantage of federal funding that's coming and things like that. And your master plan also sets you up really nicely in terms of looking at equity and where things are needed. And that talks a lot to what you were talking about, Trustee Swanson. So leaving agriculture and open space and going to multiple family. These are the orange districts that are on the map. So if you look down your map, I'm talking about everything that's orange. Right now, you have 5 multiple family districts, RM1 to RM5. RM1 and RM5 were never put on the map. So we're saying, let's just get rid of them. RM5 is actually townhouses, and saying in every multiple family category and also along your corridors, the proposal is to allow townhouses. And that was something you were trying to encourage in the planned unit development as well. And I'll get to what that is when we get to that article. So we're proposing to rename RM2, RM3, and RM4 to low, medium, and high-density multiple family. Again, truth in advertising. There are no changes to the bulk standards, so how high, the setbacks, anything like that in terms of multiple family, except to add a height limit to the high-density multiple family. And that's mostly things that look over the lake. Currently, you do not have a height limit, and in discussions with staff, legal and development team really felt like a height limit was needed, and so I think it's 5 stories. And then we're not rezoning any properties to an RM district. If anything, there are some, as I said, vacant land that's currently zoned RM that will transition to a single-family residential district in terms of being proposed. Any questions about multiple family?
Yes, Megan.
Yes.
Low, medium, and high density, is that really just according to how many apartment units they're trying to?
Yeah, how many
Okay.
apartment units, and it's essentially the same as what RM2 allows now. RM2 is low, RM3 is medium, RM4 is high. So those density measures remain the same because we know that you have limited roads and limited infrastructure, and we didn't want to add anything more in. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Megan, you were just saying that you thought the height level was 5 stories, and here it's 8, but I know
It's
that you
8.
guys have made changes to things.
No,
so
no, no, then-
We're sticking with 8.
It's 8, because then
Okay.
we looked at what's the top one that's existing and said, okay, like, we're,
Gotcha.
yeah, we don't
Okay,
want to go about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes.
The homes that are for, say, people that need assistance, where they have homes that have a lot of people in them, are they considered multifamily dwellings?
So nursing home or homes for seniors or convalescent home would be allowed in these districts, but they would have also other standards that are in Article 11, and that's for the next work session around them, to make sure that they are on parcels of the appropriate size, that they have the appropriate road access. You wouldn't want it on a tiny road back in a subdivision. You want it on a main road where there's lots of traffic, things like that.
Just briefly, so like if you can imagine like an assisted living facility where people live in sort of like condo units in a building, but they go to a main area to take meals and recreate, those would be allowed in these multiple family districts, but they require a site plan and, like Megan said, special uses, special conditions to allow for that. So, and that's not only like skilled nursing care, but also independent living where there might be, attached commissary areas or stuff like that. So those uses do get put into multiple family. However, we haven't had a lot of those come through the planning office just yet, but those would be the appropriate districts for that.
And so they would have to be rezoned?
No, they would go into one of these existing orange areas of the community in order to develop those types of developments.
Okay. All right.
Now, someone could seek to rezone. I guess to answer your question, the zoning map could always be amended by the rezoning process if someone wanted to rezone property.
Yeah.
But the way that works is you can really only move to a color that's contiguous to a color that you are. So if you're zoned single family and you want to go to multiple family, you really need to be up against another multiple family district in order to extend that color onto your property.
So if people wanted to open up a home, say in a regular neighborhood, that wouldn't work?
No, because what would happen is it would be like a spot zoning where you're trying to just zone one particular parcel for something very specific. You have to be in a district or nearby a district in order to extend it, in order to kind of get a rezoning.
Got it.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
John, are you talking about like adult foster care homes or? Yeah. Okay, so those are allowed by state law?
Those are allowed by state law within neighborhoods. If they're over a certain number of folks, that they have to be a special land use.
But those are, we're talking about, those are homes where people have a license to care for people in like a single-family house. I'm talking about an independent type, a larger facility where you pull in and there's a parking lot and you walk in and there's a big lobby and a nurse's station and all those types of things. Yeah. Yeah, adult foster care is a state protected type of housing, and that would be a whole other work session to go through that. But yes, some of those licenses are allowed to be in single-family residential neighborhoods with a state license.
Could I ask one question about the 8? Because when I think about the community, I mean, we're probably talking Clark Towers, and I know their apartment complex that's over here. I can't think of too many other places where 8, so if we're using that as a norm,
Well, that's only for, that would only be for the high density, so that darkest orange, and those are around the lakes, and I don't think there's any vacant property that is that dark orange. What we were looking to do is just to codify what's there and not create anything that we call nonconformities. Because when it doesn't match current zoning, it's very difficult. It becomes a legal nonconformity. And what happens is oftentimes it's difficult for the property owner to get a mortgage or an equity loan or anything to improve the property. And especially with your multiple family, you don't want to put it in a position where people don't feel like they should reinvest. So we weren't, and I think, again, I think most of the area that's currently vacant, that's zoned multiple family, I think the majority of that was transitioned to single family. I think there's only some things along here in River Drive in the north that remained that multiple family, and I think those are either the low or the medium.
so is Roundtree dark orange, or is that a lighter orange?
Roundtree, I think, that's the only one that's the medium density, right? Yeah.
So that's not 8 stories?
No, that's not 8 stories, and that does have room to build out. Yeah.
There looks like the 8-story is Shore Bridge, Lake Shore, that's already currently existing. And then the lighter color
Clark Towers.
orange is medium density. And there's one vacant on Tuttle Hill, and I was just trying to, yeah.
And the Planning Commission requested from us, and we will do it for the next round, so for the public hearing, and then when it comes to you for your 2 readings, that we give smaller maps of the zoning ordinance so you can see it more in a parcel by parcel, section by section. So we'll have that set up for the next time that you'll see it.
8 include, like, where the old golf course used to be next to Ford Lake? Like, what was the
Lake Shore?
Yeah.
Lake in the
would that
woods?
include that area that's now like the Frisbee golf course? Like, they could technically
Yeah,
build
right
an
now.
8-story apartment complex there if they wanted to.
That's all zone medium density under the draft map.
But we can double check that.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
It's hard to tell.
are we talking about the lake shore where the golf course used to be? This may have been before Jason's time with us. There wasn't a request to build higher there. It was denied by the FAA because of the flight paths into the airport. So you can't build much higher in that area.
A large portion of that is also their open space on their site plan. That was another issue as well, but that's a good.
No, they're all valid questions.
Yeah,
Again, that's-
absolutely.
Yeah, this is all good stuff. I mean, again, the old ordinance didn't have a height restriction at all, so, yeah, we're, again, like Megan was saying, we picked the highest tower that we have and then went with the total height of that to make sure that it stayed compliant with our code, but that's as high as we go. And I think It's that sort of dark orange color. It's Clark Towers. That's, seems to be the only parcel that's the high-density multiple family, but we'll double-check all of that for
Well, I
sure.
know Lakeshore has one of theirs has a 8-4.
Yeah, we'll definitely double-check that and verify it, but.
All right, so moving on to the next slide, if no one, some other major changes proposed is currently you have a O1, so office, B1 and B2, and those are neighborhood or local business districts. Most of those transition to what were our form-based districts, and those are mixed use. And I'll explain about that a little later, but some of those areas that are currently zoned B1 and B2, or B3 and B4, which are a general business category and that are off the corridors, they will transition to either to a neighborhood commercial district, and so Galt Village is an example of that, or a general commercial district. And so if you think of the area that's up near the easternmost interchange with I-94, that would transition, that would be that district. You also currently have a parking district, and it's kind of like scattered all over the map. There's these little tiny gray bits, especially with the requests that have come to the township in the last 2 years to park semi-trucks and just store them. What it was felt was it would be better to eliminate this district entirely. And the areas where it's currently a parking district is to wrap them into and have them zoned whatever adjacent to there. So be it whether it's a corridor or whether it's a neighborhood commercial use, usually they were off of your corridors. And so that's, while it's a major change because we're taking out a zoning district, I think there's maybe a handful of areas that are zoned that. So, any questions about that? All right, can we go to the next? Thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate your help. Also, we wanted to, again, had alluded to this earlier, you currently have 5 industrial districts. So our proposal is to boil those down to 3, and again, more truth in advertising. So Industrial Research Office and I-1 are proposed to be combined as innovation and technology. And the uses that would be in there are just what that says, is innovation, laboratories, technology, testing, light industrial. And those are all generally in the same location. I-2 and I-3 are proposed to become logistics and manufacturing. So your warehousing, your manufacturing, and again, those would be in the same location. Again, having a better name than industrial, sometimes it's not the best, doesn't show the best face. People think, smokestacks and dirty, and really that's not what industrial is anymore, and that's not what you're getting in terms of coming in. You have such innovative things coming to the township, wanting to build on that. Industrial commercial, you have that district now. It's essentially proposed to keep the same name. The district boundaries would slightly expand and come down south. This is this area over by Yucca. And then this would be an area we would propose more allowed uses, such as a range of creative uses, but also marijuana businesses, and have them in this one area. I know, Jason, you had alluded to Class C and whether they would be allowed. I double-checked the current text that we have, and in the schedule of uses, it does say Class A, Class B, Class C, and only allowed in the IC district. So didn't know if you had any concerns, questions. Do you have anything to add, Jason?
No, I think that was pretty concise.
All right. And the names really came from your creative engine of your planning commission. So thanks to them for leading the way. Finally, the last major change is the creation of form-based districts. And I'm looking at the table, and I think it was only trustee Swanson and trustee Newman who were not here. We're not part of the decision to make Ecorse Road a form-based district. So I'm going to do a 5-second explanation of why a form-based district is different than a use-based district. So use-based districts only treat everything that's the same color the same way, same setbacks, same height, same uses. A form-based district, what it does is it regulates not only by what the use is, but the parcel size. And that parcel size can vary what building type goes there, what the setbacks are, and what the uses are. Can we go to the next one so I can kind of walk through? Thank you. So this is the proposal for Packard, and that would be a neighborhood corridor like Ecorse. And you can see that there are 3 different colors there, right? And so that site A, that site B, that site C allow different uses and allow different building types to go on there. And those building types are fairly prescriptive. They say how far the building should be up. Really, these all also push the building to the street and want the parking to require the parking, except for some exceptions, to be in the back or the sides to make it a more walkable area. And then also in all the form-based districts, there are more design provisions than are currently in your ordinance. So to make sure that these high-traffic prominent streets have the best quality and the best character. So that's proposed for Ecorse, and you can see those, so in the light teal, I guess, the lightest blue, those would probably allow townhouses and a smaller shop. The larger blue could allow a bigger building and a higher building in terms of maybe 3 stories instead of 1 or 2. Okay, go to the next one. Also, we would do the same. What's proposed is to take the same structure, but then apply it to your high-traffic regional corridors like Washtenaw Avenue. And so you can see here the bright blue, that's another category that wasn't on Packard, but you don't have these really large parcels on Packard. And so what's appropriate there wouldn't be appropriate here. And actually those large parcels you could take a whole variety of different building types and kind of put them in almost like Legos on a building pad. And they give, so some of those, if you are orienting yourself, you can see like, oh, that's the parking lot for that large complex. So it would allow things to be built in front. If you've been to Pittsfield Township, where the Meijer is, and how that has developed in front of it with all the different restaurants, this would allow that type of scenario to happen on Washtenaw and Michigan Ave, East Michigan Ave. Also, the proposal is to use this same sort of concept to put in your town center, so along Huron. And then here, though, you can see you have a lot of like the dark blue and the light blue, and really looking at how do we put those big scale and small scale together and get the appropriate design. And this is one of your most prominent areas in the township. So I know that's a lot. Jason, did you have anything to add about the form-based code and how it helps in terms of getting the quality of design that the township's looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it just, traditional zoning ordinances treat sort of a one-size-fits-all prescription for development. It just, setbacks for a Target store are going to be the same setbacks required for a Payless Shoes or a smaller commercial center. Whereas these form-based codes look at the size of the lot, they take a look at the uses inside of that larger lot, and then it allows for it to be more prescriptive. Could be smaller buildings, a mix of smaller buildings, higher density buildings. It really allows for there to be a whole lot more creativity in development and allows people to do something way more creative and more pedestrian scale on a lot of our corridors than wouldn't otherwise be allowed now. I mean, traditionally, like in our commercial corridors along Washington Avenue. As you know, the parking lot's front and center, the building's set back way away from the street, and someone who's walking down the street has to walk through a parking lot to get to a building. Well, this sort of flips that, puts the building at the street, makes it accessible to someone who's walking down the road, and if you're gonna visit there, the parking's in the rear, so that the cars aren't necessarily, front and center in a development. And I think Megan brings up a good example. If you go down, what is that, Ann Arbor Saline Road? Sort of by where the Meyer has been, they have all that new infill development in the parking lots. They're sort of reutilizing space that was underutilized. We all know that those parking lots don't get filled up, not even on Black Friday or the day, after Thanksgiving. So there's a lot of.
Kroger's is full.
She's right. Maybe just Kroger's, but yeah, so this will allow for a lot of underutilized space to be utilized again in the future, not only on Washtenaw, but, East Michigan Avenue and Ecorse Road. And, it should be a huge benefit to developers wanting to do business here in town and our residents as well.
Jason, I had a question for you.
Sure.
Does this actually allow your department to really make it easier to work with businesses coming in? Basically, I'm not going to call it a gray area. I'm going to call it just flexibility. Thank you. Flexibility for economic development in your department.
Yes, we haven't had a lot of projects come in under the Ecorse Road form-based code just yet, but in other communities that have been getting traction in that, like Pittsfield Township, certainly developers are utilizing it. And they're getting the benefit from it. I mean, you're maximizing the space and you're getting that quality development, that pedestrian scale, mixed use development that people want. So this will definitely be a huge benefit to us, especially being able to deal with development on the corridors for sure. The high level or quality of development that this will require will, set us apart from, someone who may want to just come in and do the bare minimum. This kind of sets the bar a little bit higher in that respect.
Thanks.
So currently, the example you gave on Washtenaw, where you walk through the parking lot, that's an example of a use form, a use-based
So
zoning.
the way the ordinance used to prescribe the development now, the developers who develop, let's say the old Kmart or At Home, if you will, I'm picking on that one, but years ago, they had, the setback was probably 50 to 80 feet from the property line, but that traditional type development put the priority on parking. That was always the first thing is, okay, how many parking spaces are we going to have per how many square feet? And that's how a lot of development was done historically. This takes sort of the weight off the parking and puts the weight more on the building and where it's going to be located. And then, parking is sort of secondary to all of that. Now, it's not that parking's not important. It just doesn't need to be the number one issue that drives a certain development, because quite frankly, everything is overparked. There's way more parking spaces than needed for most things. Except for Kroger at Paint Creek.
No, that is the one that, regardless of where I go, it's always busy. It's maximum. It's just at the max with parking. But normally and environmentally, it's better to have, less parking. And like the Marriott is built out for the very maximum amount, and it's rarely, I don't know if it's ever been completely full, So I do think our parking was overparked.
Yeah, and we're not.
Overparked
As a community, we're not. There's a lot of communities that are overparked, and that's just sort of the hangover from a bygone zoning period.
Right. And what the form-based does also is, as Jason alluded, there's always a minimum. Like, you just have to do this, but you can go as far back as you want. But really, as a pedestrian and a motorist, where that building is affects how you use the street, the character of the street, what it looks like. So when you go through the building forms, and so those are the really pretty sheets, you'll see that there's a minimum and a maximum in most cases. And saying that, you have to be in this space so that you don't have something that is, 10 feet off the road, and then the next thing is 25 feet. And then the next thing is that, so you form the buildings, while they may have some variation of 10 to 15 feet in between them, it's not 20 to 30, which is hard for a pedestrian, and then also hard as a motorist because people are coming from all different directions. So.
Am I reading Galt Village is neighborhood commercial?
Neighborhood commercial.
Business, neighborhood
Yeah.
business.
Neighborhood business, yes. And in those neighborhood businesses, they would have additional design. The NC and the GC have additional design requirements that are in the general provisions. So that's another chapter. But even if something's not in the form-based code, we did make sure that we put design regulations in for those use-based districts, especially for commercial and industrial, so that you would still get the same level of quality.
And in order to do form-based, it has to be one of these areas, or can anyone do it as long as it's the NC, GC, NCR, RC regional, right? And-
Yes.
Okay.
So as long as it is the NCR or the RC, so the pink and the dark red.
If that's red, I would be shocked, but okay.
So dark maroon. So,
I'm just trying to.
yeah. And we did get some feedback from if you could go to the next one, Lisa, I would really appreciate it. We did get some feedback from the Planning Commission that we needed to work on the graphic image of these. Maybe there was a little too much going on and a little more gradation in between colors. So we would welcome any input on that, and that we would go back and redo these maps in terms of colors. We only have so many colors to work with, though, our GIS tech pointed out to me.
So you have all East Michigan Avenue as regional corridor because it's a main artery, US 12.
Yeah. So East Michigan Avenue, West Michigan Avenue, Washtenaw are regional. Huron is a regional corridor up until Huron River, and after Huron River, then that's a neighborhood corridor. A neighborhood corridor, of course, on E-course, continuing that and wrapping up, and then also on Packard.
What are the hashtags over on Huron Street? There's different colors, and is that agricultural overlay?
No, up on, oh, yeah, that on Huron, those are currently look like working lands. We can take those off.
What are they?
Just on the existing land use survey we did for the master plan, those came up as agriculture when we looked at them. They currently have corn or winter wheat on them. If you would rather take that off, we can take that off.
Well, no, I was just wondering what it was because.
Yeah, I think it's the Czech property, and then also I can't remember the gentleman's name that has the trust there behind the party store at the corner, but those are, like Stan was just saying.
But you have
they're-
Paint Creek Crossing as number 7, and it has hashtags. I just want to.
Oh, we'll check into that.
Yeah, that's
that seems weird.
confusing to me when you see that. So you're saying that it's currently being used for, well, they rototill it and hopefully something grows. Some of it does, some of it doesn't, but they get a exemption on or something, don't they? If it's an ag use.
There might be something in their taxes, or they might have had
Farmland
a
preservation.
Yes, it's PA 116 that they got at one point in time. That would help them with their taxes. So, but we don't have to keep that overlay on there. If there are areas that you notice like,
Well, I don't know if you should or not. It was just, it wasn't clear.
Yeah.
It was for me.
So that underlying zoning would always be there, and it's just that then they would have these additional uses with that agricultural overlay.
Madam Chair. Just about the colors, like the only two that are really hard, I think, for me to see, and the ones that I've heard complaints about are like the ones in the middle. So for the yellow and the orange, like you could leave the lightest and the darkest, but like the middle one is always really hard to tell, like, you know, which way it goes,
Okay,
if that makes sense. So if you
So
could have
the-
2 more colors, that would be great.
okay.
And I had a couple of questions about the form-based.
Sure.
So it seems like that could be very invigorating for the areas. But if there's too much flexibility, it could end up being kind of hodgepodge like it is right now. So is there, when you talk about it, it can't be right on the road because for walkability, we can't do that. But if the properties are developing, it seems like you're going to want a nice sidewalk, maybe even some planters or some other things to give it that kind of almost like a kind of a downtown-y, like, it's not downtown because it's not those kind of areas, but make it feel aesthetically more like that. So how do we do that when it might be parcel by parcel doing it? When you look at Pittsfield Township and a couple of the ones that were referenced, those were probably done as a pretty large project rather than piece by piece. And then I also know that there were a few problems when they shifted to this about what the expectations were, that it had to look like the front of a building. And so how do we learn the best way to move to form and learn from any mistakes that people have done? So that we're really clear, because people are still going to want to come in the back end where they've parked instead of
Absolutely.
walking around to go to the front. And
Yeah.
even business owners, it's always easy to have one door or to be able, you know, for businesses. So there's a lot that's got to go there to make that work in a way that we are hoping it would work and to reinvigorate the areas that it would be nice to reinvigorate.
So we've been the planning consultant for Pittsfield Township for at least a decade now. And so our firm was the firm that wrote their form-based code and have adapted and also learned lessons. And all of those lessons have been baked into what we've done here, because we continually update how we do our form-based code based on lessons through our clients. So that's one. Two, in terms of the continuity, I would say for you to look specifically at Section 507, the design standards, and you'll see that there are ones on pedestrian and non-motorized access and with clear connections, building placement and orientation, and that they have to have a relationship with each other and the entire corridor, parking placement, orientation, screening, and architectural design and building standards. Also, there's standards for transparency, so that's how much windows there are there, and of course, we would not allow them, the sign regulations wouldn't allow them to fill it all up with signs, and also have some regulations about not crazy LED lighting that's going round and round. But, so those things are in there, and landscaping, and also where the loading and storage areas are, and where the dumpster areas are, those affect that as well. And so because there are the same guidelines then for that entire corridor, then that's how you get that continuity. And then the sidewalks are always required by your engineering standards, and that they need to be in the same space. And so also, and the township works really well with the road commission to make sure that driveways are appropriately placed and that you still get those connections.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say and add to that, our community has a lot of varying size parcels on different, Michigan Avenue is historic in a sense. It has a lot of parcels that are really non-conforming. E-course Road certainly does. Packard is sort of uniform in and of itself, but Washtenaw, is fairly uniform, but it's in those smaller neighborhood, specifically those smaller neighborhood areas where this will, not that it won't work township-wide, it most certainly will, but it will shine the most in areas like E-course Road and Packard Road, where we can get the scale for the neighborhood to match what's around it. And E-course Road has such small parcels that in and of themselves are extremely hard to develop under like the current standards that we have and get anything meaningful, whereas this will allow someone to come in and prioritize putting something in those spaces and make decisions about what's important to them. They may not have to provide as much parking, and so therefore smaller parcels may become eligible to have some sort of townhouses or something like that placed on them. So this will definitely give us the flexibility that we need to allow for more creative projects, and certainly in those neighborhood areas that need the most redevelopment.
Yes, Trustee Newman.
Is there an example in Pittsfield Township of a street that we could look at?
So for that regional corridor, I would say Ann Arbor Saline Road. Just when you get off of where I-94 comes in and you head south. And you'll see that there's been a lot of development in the parking lots and the multiple family, but what I would encourage you to do is to kind of go back and see how they're, both of them, those ones that line the buildings, so the streets really changed. But then also kind of when you go through the back door, and whether you're going to the Myers, you'll see that there's also entranceways and the same design on the back side that there is on the front side. And that is tough to get developers to do. And what they tend to do is the first time they encounter it in your community, they're going to push. And if you toe the line and tell them that they needed to do it, 9 times out of 10, they do it. Also, what this does is this kind of puts all the 100 things you want down and say, these are the 100 things we want. Instead of what tends to happen, especially if you're doing things through special land uses and PUDs, is then you say, oh, we want these 10 things. But then as you go through the process, 10 more come up, and then 10 more came up. Oh, and we asked this for this person before. So what we tried to do was to say, okay, these are all the things that we want. We're just going to say that you want them, that you have to do them. And if you want to, we'll allow you an exception, but then you have to go through a public hearing. It's going to be a little more difficult for you. And so that's, in our experience, how you get development, quality development. But you're going to have to, one of the things to know is that you're going to get pushback the first couple times. And then it's whether, where do you hold the line? And that's a community decision. And that's a decision that's made at this level, at the Planning Commission level.
Thank you. I've seen Ann Arbor Saline Road, and over by Meyer, there's a development for, condos or, and then the parking lot there's like a Buddy's Pizza, and there's like, so if that's an example, then I would be okay with that.
Okay, yeah. So, I know that we probably have 8 more minutes left, and like 7 articles to touch on, which is just not going to be possible. So we have another work session, but I'd like to turn it over to you and say, out of those 1 through 7, was there a particular one that any one of you wanted to talk about or had questions about? The one I know for me would be the planned unit development, if we only have 5 minutes or 6 minutes to talk. But it's your work session, and we're here to answer your questions.
And we want to take a break before our next meeting as well.
Yeah, or we could end here and then pick this up. That would be fine.
Okay, yeah.
That would be fine.
Megan, if we have any questions in the meantime, do you want us to filter them to you guys, or?
Absolutely. Please send them to myself and Jason. If you do not have my contact information,
I can send it out.
Jason,
And I'll make sure they get to Megan.
It's a lot of reading.
It's a tremendous amount of reading, and I thank you for doing it. And I know it's a lot to absorb.
But it's important. It's very, very important to get everything and make it better for developers and protect our neighborhoods, and add walkability and sustainability and agriculture. I mean, we're doing a lot of good things in it. And the
Yeah,
master plan process really helped us. So the
Yes.
idea is to have our zoning map match the master plan.
absolutely. And this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where you make that master plan happen, each development at a time.
So thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. The time is 6:36.